Welcome to the Great White North. My name is Neil Fisher. I'm a Saskatoon-based photographer and videographer here today to talk to you about the new Canon 5D Mark IV and to give you a few of my thoughts. To begin with the sensor, 30.4 megapixels, it's a great step forward over the old 5D3 and the 22 megapixels it had. I personally will never complain about file sizes and processing times as long as I'm getting more detail because of it. The 5D4 definitely delivers there. 4 years ago, I used the Nikon D800 extensively. The 36 megapixels in that camera was impressive. Moving back to the 5D3, I definitely yearned for more resolution. The 5D4 delivers. 30.4 megapixels, is it enough? That's a question you're gonna have to ask yourself. It depends a lot on what you're shooting, what you're photographing. Personally, it's enough for me, and it's also competitive resolution if you look at other top-end cameras. Nikon's D5, D500, they both have 20 megapixels. Even Canon's top-of-the-line 1DX Mark II also has 20 megapixels. One quick disclaimer for you, all imagery captured by the Canon 5D Mark IV shown throughout this video will have a little black bar at the bottom of your screen filled with the XF information. That imagery is non-color corrected, unprocessed, and straight from the camera. Moving along to dynamic range, I think the 5D Mark IV offers a vast improvement over any Canon camera that I've ever used, and that includes the 1DX, the 1DX2, the 5D3, the 5D2, the 70D, and the newer 80D. I can't comment on the 5DS or the 5DSR as I have not used those cameras, but like I said, of the Canon cameras I have used, I think this offers the best dynamic range. And the folks over at DxOMark, if you think their comments hold any weight, I certainly do, they would agree with that statement. They gave this sensor 91 points, which is the best Canon sensor they've ever tested, which says a lot for Canon. It really is impressive how much detail you can recover from shadows with little to no noise. Recovering highlights certainly a lot easier as well. The big question though is how does this 5D Mark IV compare to a dynamic range beast like a Nikon D810? That's a camera I've used extensively, and I actually think the 5D Mark IV does a great job. It comes close, it is comparable, but it doesn't quite beat it. The Nikon D810, it still reigns supreme. However, that is a slower camera. It's like maple syrup and zero gravity, but it's 2 years old now, so you really never know what Nikon's got up their sleeve. ISO or ISO, whichever you call it, has seen only a slight improvement over the older 5D Mark III. The native ISO for the 5D Mark IV is ISO 100 to 32,000, and that's expandable from ISO 50 to 102,400, which is good considering they're adding more resolution. You're adding smaller photo sites onto the same size sensor. Overall, it's a great sensor. It produces beautiful images, lots of detail, but it could be a bit sharper. And for that, you only have to look at the Canon 5DS and 5DSR. The R has no AA filter. And by that, I don't mean you're from Canada, eh? I mean AA is an anti-aliasing. So that's appealing to wildlife and landscape photographers, people who aren't going to be encountering human-made patterns like brick walls, textured fabrics, things that are prone to moire. I was really hopeful that the 5D Mark IV would have those two options with and without an AA filter, but apparently not. The 5D Mark IV sees the introduction of dual pixel RAW. It's a new technology that Canon claims can move the focus after you've taken the photo, but only by a small amount. Nothing as serious as a Litro camera. I tried it out the other evening while photographing some birds receiving rehabilitative care at the Western College of Veterinary Medicine. And once I got home and got the photos on my computer, I couldn't find a single photo where dual pixel RAW was a benefit. Opening up digital RAW optimizer and pushing it all the way back, pulling it all the way forward, I couldn't see an improvement in sharpness, and I couldn't see that depth of field move at all. It's also worth mentioning that dual pixel RAW adjustments right now have to be made in Canon's own digital photo professional software, which is good software, but it's definitely not Lightroom or Photoshop. The 5D4 offers 61 AF points, just like its older 5D3 sibling. 41 of those points are cross-type, and they've now been expanded for 24% more vertical coverage, because all the vertical. Wildlife photographers will appreciate that all 61 of those AF points work at f8. If you're shooting with a 600 or a 500mm f4 lens, you slap a 2x teleconverter on there, all 61 of those AF points will work for you. That's amazing. Autofocus is rated to work at a light value of -3. If you enable live view, that goes down to -4. I've tested that out. In very low light situations, autofocus is very strong in the 5D4. The AF system in this camera is supposedly directly from the 1DX Mark II, which is amazing. Although the resolution of the metering sensor in the 5D Mark IV is slightly lower than that high-end camera. The difference, very hard to determine. The new AR selection button on the back makes moving between AF modes very easy. If you're familiar with the 1DX Mark II, the menu system is exactly the same. You've got all the same cases or scenarios, and you can customize those to your heart's content. Autofocus is impressive, it's snappy, overall very responsive, and paired with 7 frames per second and a buffer of 21 raw images, this camera does feel quick. However, it could be much quicker, and that likely would have meant giving up on the compact flash format and moving towards CFast cards. Personally, I could have gone either way, but many people I've spoken with complain about the high price of CFast cards, which is true. But if you're someone who shoots with a 1DX Mark II, CFast cards have been part of your kit and part of your workflow for quite some time now. If that thunderous 7 frame per second burst got you curious about the 5D Mark IV's silent shutter, here's a quick comparison with my Sennheiser ME66 1 centimeter from the camera body. I don't have anything official to calculate decibel levels, so I'm going to rely on Adobe Premiere's audio meters to visually show you the difference between high-speed continuous shutter and silent continuous shutter. In 2008, the 5D Mark II was Canon's first digital SLR to have video capabilities, and the 5D3 built on it. The 5D Mark IV takes it even further with the inclusion of 4K video. And just like the 1DC and the 1DX Mark II, it is DCI 4K. So it has a resolution of 4096 by 2160, and it looks amazing, looks great. There are a few buts though, and the biggest but in my opinion is the motion JPEG codec this camera uses. It was designed in the mid-90s, and it means that file sizes, they're not just big, they are ridiculously massive. That means you're gonna have to buy more compact flash cards, fast ones, and more hard drives for your computer. 4K video can be captured at 30 frames progressive and 24 frames progressive. There's no 60 like the 1DX Mark II. Personally, I think that has a lot to do with the compact flash card once again. If they had gone with the CFast card for this camera, we might have seen 60 frames progressive. Full HD, 1920, 1080, looks great for this camera. There's no pixel binning, it's the full sensor being read out. It can be captured at 60 frames progressive, nice and smooth. If you're in a bind and you really need to capture some slow motion footage, it can do 120 frames per second, but that brings the resolution down to 1280 by 720, and it overall just has a rather lackluster look to it. Sticking with video, the 5D Mark IV now has dual pixel autofocus, and it's quite impressive. Tracking and accuracy are both very good. Though as others have considered dual pixel RAW a gimmick, I'm going to consider dual pixel AF a gimmick. I don't think this is a piece of technology that professionals will be adopting anytime soon. If you've worked in broadcast, those big E&G cameras, that's all manual focus. If you've worked on a movie set, it is someone's dedicated job to pull focus. I personally will not be relying on a piece of technology to pull focus when I'm shooting something that's important. That said, it is very handy if you're just shooting around the house, you've got kids playing, or it's something funny going on. Dual pixel autofocus is very helpful. Okay, this is your low light, high ISO test for the 5D Mark IV, specifically in regards to video. It is currently October 16th. It's about 9 p.m. I am in Grasslands National Park, which is in southern Saskatchewan. And on a night that is dark enough, this is considered a dark sky preserve. You're not able to see a single light on the horizon from anywhere in the park, which is really cool. This evening, however, is obviously an exception. I'm not sure what phase the moon is in, but it's obviously very close to being full. I have a shadow right now. It is that bright. It's bright enough that the autofocus and face detect is able to follow me as I move throughout the frame, which is pretty impressive for this camera. ISO for video in the 5D Mark IV, it tops out at 25,600, which is what it is set at right now. It's shooting with a 35mm f1.4 and it's wide open at 1.4, and I've brought the shutter speed down a bit to 1/30th of a second, so you might get a bit of motion blur. It's not quite as smooth as the 1/60th of a second, which you should be recording at if you're filming with 29.97 frames per second. This is more just a test of the low light capabilities. It's definitely grainy, it's noisy, but it's really just impressive how much light this camera is able to pick up. One quick note, the moon was actually full on that evening, October 16th. Also, the ISO for 4K video cannot reach that 25,600. It is stuck at 12,800. I won't generalize and say everyone, but many people that I've heard speak about the 5D Mark IV seem very surprised by the large crop factor when recording 4K video. And yes, it is big, but you have to think back to 2008 when Canon made the 5D Mark II. They had no intention of striking gold and starting a revolution, it just happened. That is reflected in the 5D Mark III and the limited video upgrades that camera received. That goes even farther into the 5D Mark IV. It's very obvious Canon wants to keep its digital SLRs photocentric and separate from its cinema EOS products, and I'm quite all right with that. What I'm trying to say is you should not be surprised this is primarily a photo camera. If you're a videographer, there are many video cameras that'll do the job just as well at a similar price point. Yes, the crop factor is significant, but there are a few solutions. Canon's own 11 to 24mm f4 lens. It's a little expensive, but there's also Sigma's recently announced 12 to 24 f4 lens. Both will combat that big crop factor pretty easily. Personally though, I'm embracing it. I'm a wildlife photographer. That means this 70 to 200 just became a 120 to 350mm f2.8 lens. That's pretty useful. The addition of an LCD touch panel is greatly appreciated. I know 3-year-olds who can navigate through photos in an iPad. They know how to pinch to zoom, so it really only makes sense that modern technology has found its way into a modern camera. I've never been one to complain about Canon's menu system. I find it straightforward, intuitive, easy to navigate, but the addition of the touchscreen does make that much easier and much faster. Personally, I think the omission of a tilting or an articulated LCD display was the right decision. Canon's 70D, the 80D, those articulating screens, they really just don't feel tough. I would always choose a rugged camera over convenience. That said, if you really are stuck, you've got your camera at an awkward angle, you can always pair it with your smartphone through Wi-Fi, and you've got that remote shooting option, and it's very helpful. Wi-Fi, NFC, and GPS have all made their way to the 5D Mark IV, and depending on what type of photographer you are, these pieces of technology will provide varying degrees of usefulness. As a landscape and wildlife photographer, I'm excited to have GPS inside this camera instead of having to pony up a few $100s for an external add-on and then adding some extra bulk. GPS has 2 modes, and in the first mode, the signal is always active, even when you switch your camera off, and this can be detrimental to the battery life. In the second mode, when you switch your camera off, the GPS is switched off. However, it does remain active if the camera auto powers down. If you've never used the camera with geotagging capabilities, it can be really helpful. When you're browsing through a collection of images, instead of searching by date or by metadata keyword, you can visually browse a map of the world and search for where you took your photo. It's also great to have Wi-Fi and NFC, though I've heard a number of people complain about the complexity in Canon's Wi-Fi connection process, and that's something I really don't agree with. Here's a real-time walkthrough working with the assumption you've already connected your camera and smartphone at least once, and I've also sped things up by adding the communication settings to the first tab of my favorites menu. Start by turning on Wi-Fi/NFC on your camera. Open up Canon's Camera Connect app on your smartphone. If you are already connected to another Wi-Fi network, you will manually have to select your camera's SSID. Wait for the Wi-Fi connection to sort itself out, and you are ready for remote shooting. Wi-Fi is great when it comes to remote shooting, but it can be sluggish for image transfers between camera and smartphone. So for that, I rely on old school USB. A host USB adapter for any smartphone is rather inexpensive, and it is much faster than Wi-Fi. All right, to wrap things up, it is the big 4,500 Canadian dollar question, and that is, of course, is the Canon 5D Mark IV worth it? Personally, I think so. Obviously, I have invested in one. There certainly are cameras that are better suited for specific situations. If you're shooting sports and wildlife, you've got Canon's 1DX Mark II, the 7D Mark II, Nikon's D5 and the D500. Fast cameras, high frame rates, that's what they're designed for. If you shoot landscapes, portraits, still life, you've got Nikon's D810, Canon's 5DS and the 5DSR. High resolution cameras, that's what they're designed for. The Canon 5D Mark IV, I don't think it's designed just for one thing. I feel it's designed for everything. It's a jack of all trades and a very strong camera. However, what I don't think it's designed for is capturing video. If you're someone who used the Canon 5D Mark II or the 5D Mark III as your primary video capture device, I don't think the 5D Mark IV will continue that tradition. The crop factor when recording 4K video at 1.74, it's significant. It doesn't give you the ssame full frame look as the 5D2 and the 5D3 did. The motion JPEG codec, the files that codec results in, they're big, they're cumbersome. You're gonna have to transcode all your video if you wanna make this your primary video capture device. That said, if you're simply a photographer and you're capturing the odd video here and there, this camera is perfect for you. I've been using this since early September. Big thanks to Don's Photo here in Saskatoon for making that happen. And in the time that I've been using it, I've really come to love it. That said, I would consider myself brand agnostic. If there's a better tool that comes along, I will certainly invest in it. Hopefully what I've shown you today, you found helpful in some way. If you like this video, click like, write a comment below, and thanks for watching.